Geology, geology, geology. Welcome to the mini geology program. This is Daniel Minisini, your inquisitive geologist. And today, the Bearded Lady Project. A project started in 2014 with a short YouTube clip. And then the idea grew into 2 documentary films, a portrait exhibition, a scholarship fund, and now a book. We'll talk about the book that just came out. The title is The Bearded Lady Project, Challenging the Face of Science. With us, the editors, Lexi Jamieson Marsh, filmmaker, among several other things, and Ellen Currano, paleontologist, among several other things. Lexi and Ellen, very welcome. What is the problem that you denounce with this book?
The problem that we are challenging is negative gender stereotypes, specifically the reproduction and reliance that has been created or built off of early paleontologists, specifically the black and white portraits that exist within textbooks. So that reference is reused, recycled, and we've become a little too reliant on the fact that this is what a paleontologist should look like.
Yeah, and so I think about growing up. I've wanted to be a paleontologist since I was a kid, and the images that I always saw were of white men, many of them bearded. I don't look like that. I'm not huge. I can't grow a beard. So do I fit in paleontology? And this is about, showing everybody that they belong. They can do field science if they want to. And with a little help, anybody can have a beard.
A question that is impossible to avoid. So why the lady is bearded?
So the beard was in response to putting a beard on was in response to Ellen's joke initially that if the only thing holding me back is that I don't have facial hair, what would happen if I just fixed that problem? Would everything be solved? And so, this kind of tongue-in-cheek joke turned into, well, what if we actually did this? So we started approaching women. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to, first of all, focus on these scientists, the research that they were conducting, their stories, how they built their careers, by actually inserting them into the history books of all of these beautiful colonial photographs that only feature men. So now we're making up for what essentially is a lost legacy by showing that women should be documented and should be celebrated for their work.
Is it mainly about women or not necessarily about the problems of women in geoscience or paleontology, as you are mentioning?
The project is inspired off of Ellen's experience. We had this conversation where I was coming from the perspective of a woman working in a male-dominated field of filmmaking. When I confided in her that I was really frustrated and didn't feel like I would ever have an upward progression in my field, she said that she struggled with the same issues that I had, and that blindsided me. And I found that very upsetting because I knew how competent she was. And as she explained it further, she said, as a woman in my field, I can't just do my job. And that's all she wanted to do. That's all I want to do, is I just want to show up and do my job. So she, as a woman in her field, is either pushed forward to do service, to be the representative for all women because she is the lone female. So all eyes are on her. So not only must she do her job, she has to do it to the best, if not beyond the best of her abilities, or else other women will suffer. While simultaneously being pushed forward to be a representative, she's ignored and spoken over by her colleagues in her department. That her voice doesn't ultimately matter when it comes to showing up to do her job. And so out of frustration, it seemed like the only thing that was holding her back was her lack of facial hair. So the project started by Ellen just out of frustration and trying to lighten the mood, saying, if I just slapped a beard on my face, maybe I could just show up and do my job. And we both laughed, and I couldn't get that image out of my head that that was the one thing, the piece of the puzzle that was missing to success was the facial hair. And in my mind, coming from a theatrical background, that was an easy fix. And so it began as, how, as a woman, how do I fix this problem? So, and that will progress into a myriad of different identities. So our overall message is everyone should be able to do science. We started with women should be able to do science, and now we're bringing the conversation deeper to hopefully bring a deeper awareness of the fact that identity is not black and white.
And Ellen, what are exactly the challenges and the obstacles that women face in the ones that are in your situation, being a paleontologist among men?
So there are a number of challenges, and I'll speak a little bit about the ones that I faced, and recognizing that I'm a white woman and I have very well educated and supported parents. And so I have that privilege. I've had a lot fewer hurdles placed in my way than other women. And so we thought it was really important in our project to give voice to a wide variety of women who've faced different challenges. So on my end, kind of the top two challenges were feeling like I belonged. And, you know, when I started off in college and grad school, I had a pretty even split among my classmates of men and women. And then as I started progressing through my career, you know, over and over again, I was the only woman in the room, or just one of a couple. I was the only woman at the field sites. And then that led me to question, do I belong here? Am I good enough? Am I tough enough? Am I strong enough? Am I smart enough? That was hard. That was putting energy into combating that doubt instead of being able to put that energy into just doing what I loved and doing science.
Do you think that these problems are the same or similar for women that are geoscientists at large, or women in general, not necessarily geoscientists?
Well, so for sure for geosciences. And so NSF has done a number of surveys of the geosciences workforce. And I believe it's something like 18% of geoscience faculty members are women. There's similar underrepresentation in STEM fields, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Those fields all have incredible underrepresentation of women. And so also kind of thinking about some of the broader things and, you know, moving beyond just things that I've experienced, there have been some really powerful studies of the implicit biases that we have about who belongs in science. So Currano Moss-Racusin, and I'm sorry if I pronounced her name wrong. So she and colleagues did just this amazing study. They were surveying principal investigators, so people who run labs. And they said, you know, hey, we're doing this study of how resumes are evaluated and how people are selected for lab tech positions. And so a lab tech is an introductory step. You know, it's usually someone after college, they go into a lab tech position for a few years, and that can be a launching point for going on to graduate school. So Moss-Racusin and colleagues said, okay, we're doing this study of, you know, how resumes are evaluated and how decisions are made about lab techs. And they sent out to a bunch of scientists 2 resumes that were exactly the same. So half the scientists got a resume that said John on the cover, and then the other half got a resume that said Jennifer. Otherwise, they were exactly the same. And so John was consistently rated as being more competent, more deserving of mentorship, and given a higher salary. And it didn't matter whether the scientists were men or women. John was, always ranked higher. So we have this implicit bias that men are more competent, deserving of mentorship, should be paid more. And then there's also the, women are more feeling and caring. And so then if you have a woman in science where, caring shouldn't matter at all, and this woman is just doing her job and being a scientist, then if she's not, seen as motherly, then she's breaking that stereotype and she's facing those challenges.
The title of the book is The Bearded Lady Project, Challenging the Face of Science. Who are the readers of this book?
In many ways, the most important audience, I would say there are two most important audiences. So number one is the geoscience community. A lot of the things that need to be done to make the geosciences a more welcoming place for women need to come at the highest level. So people who are in leadership positions need to be aware of the inequities that exist. So we definitely want that audience. And then for me, the number two audience is aspiring scientists, both men and women, or boys and girls, depending on how old they are. And so we highlight these incredible scientists who happen to be women. And so I want them to be role models for the next generation coming up, for the girls to see there are people who look like me, even if they're wearing beards, but we also have pictures of them unbearded. And then for the boys to also see, like, hey, they're, awesome women in this field for me to have as role models as well.
In the first chapter, it is written that we live in a society that still strictly enforces expectations with regard to gender. Are you referring here to the United States?
Primarily, because that's our experience.
So does the American society has a patriarchal order today?
Yes.
Even if you say that the American society is still patriarchal, well, many societies that are way less progressive than the American one. So could those societies understand you denouncing the struggle of women? And on the other side, can this book be considered maybe nothing important or ridiculed by societies that are more progressive than the American society?
Well, I mean, our project walks a very fine line of offending, disregarding. So early in the project, we had some scientists that were fearful to participate or were told by their institutions that they could not participate because there was concern for the way that they would look. So in American society, a woman cannot come off as funny if she wants to be seen as professional. So there is that challenge of, is a woman who has spent her entire career overcoming hurdles, fighting tooth and nail, willing to sacrifice it all for putting on a beard. And that was a big risk. We didn't know what was going to come of this project. And to appear not professional is a big risk for women in the United States of America. So that said, I think internationally it would become very problematic. I do have to emphasize the fact that we're not playing dress up, and this is not cross-dressing. The only change that we made to the women in the portraits is that we put a fake beard on them. So everything else, the clothing, the field site, the labs, those are all based on the subject's research, where they wanted to be filmed, how they wanted to pose. the one thing that we change is we put on a fake beard. So if you were to walk by and look, you would think initially that you were looking at a man, and if you realized it was a woman, would that challenge your assumptions of that scientist?
Did you get any feedback from your international colleagues or not yet?
Not sure, international colleagues.
Did you get any feedback from within the United States?
Yes, we did 2 showings of the exhibition. We did 2 previews, first at the Geological Society of America's annual meeting in 2017, and then followed by the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology's annual meeting. One of the comments that we got was from an early supporter of our project, Paul Harnick. Paul Harnick came to the preview exhibition at the Geological Society of America's annual meeting in Denver, Colorado. And even though he understood the concept of the project, he was friends with Ellen before, when he saw the photographs in person, he said he was very taken aback by how many women he personally recognized. Because I think that the issue is that we all know that there is a problem with gender stereotypes. We know that there's a disparity between women's representation, but we don't know it personally because we're not able to talk about it. So Paul being able to recognize colleagues, professionals whose research he had followed, the fact that he knew so many of them was very shocking, because he said, I knew this was a problem. I didn't know it was a problem for them.
And reiterating something Lexi had said earlier, as a woman in science, you do, or at least I do, feel like I have to be very serious all the time, that if I want people to take me seriously, I have to be a good, serious scientist. And so there was this, it was a big leap of faith for everyone who participated in the project to be silly and to put a beard on. And I think there was, Paul is certainly not the only one who expressed these feelings. We would, see people come into the exhibit and just be like, whoa, I know that person, I know that person, I know that person. And yet this recognition that there are so many women who were willing to participate and put the beard on.
Is there any implication on facial hair, the so-called hirsutism, or is just a funny joke? Is there any issue related with gender identity or sexual orientation, or is just a funny thing to do to put on the beard?
I think we walk a fine line. We have had a lot of shared experiences from people in the trans community that have said, I find this offensive. It's usually an immediate reaction because there is that assumption that we're pretending to be male and suggesting that, women should conform. We're trying to challenge that by using comedy. So it was meant to create a reaction, because I believe that we can't have an honest discussion unless we're able to see and hear our true opinions. And I think that's the beauty of art, is that there's no one right way to respond. There's a whole myriad of ways that, we'll react to a project like this. So once that's out in the open, we're able to start and have a conversation versus just, blanket stating, we know this is a problem. We're able to now see what angle we're coming from and share our personal experiences. So I think in a way it's given the trans community a platform to share their experiences and to say, this is why this offends me. And I think that that's fantastic. And then we can respond and say, this is why we support the fact that there is no one identity who should be conducting field work. And in the book, we do have a beardless portrait of Dr. Sarah Pruce from Smith College, which is a female university. And she said, I love the project, I want to participate, but I want to stand in solidarity with my trans students and not be bearded, because she said that just crossed a line for her. And her essay is removing the beard for good. So essentially we're taking our audience and saying, this is the direction that we want to go to. The beards are here. You're paying attention now. Now that you're paying attention, this is what we should be doing.
Is lady an offensive term?
I would say lady is better than girl. I don't know. Ellen, what do you think?
I don't have a problem with it.
Are you a feminist?
Yes.
Yes.
Who is a feminist?
I think that everyone should be a feminist. You know, a feminist is someone who stands up for equal rights for women, and who is committed to helping make these big infrastructure changes and institutional changes that will allow women an equal chance of success. I would like people to do more than just say, I hired the best person. It's important to recognize what hurdles have been faced, what biases we have, that women are less likely to be nominated for major awards. Women tend to not get as many grants. Their papers are often more harshly reviewed. So recognizing that these biases are in place, and thinking about how can we change the system, and how can we review people for major awards, taking into account the service burden for women.
I would like to ask you, both of you, what do you have in common?
We really have a lot in common. We are all very keen observers of the world around us.
So Ellen and I have been friends for many years. We were friends for many years before this project started. So I think we met for the first time at a tailgate at a football game. So, I think personality-wise, Ellen and I are pretty easygoing. We like sports. We like cooking, hanging out. Ellen has just been one of the greatest friends that I've had, and we've had each other's backs for some of the highs and the lows that we've both experienced. Ellen's always up for anything, so she actually came and acted in a scene that I had to direct for my master's degree that I am forever grateful for her to do.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. I was awful. I tried.
So I think, just we've always had a mutual respect for each other, and we've always been willing to step up and to be there for one another. And so now we're in like a decade-long friendship. And we just had a lot of fun. We're totally fine being silly.
Your friendship was very important for starting the project.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of trust involved, most definitely on Ellen's end, because she was the face of the project. She was also the reason we got our funding. We were part of the broader outreach portion of her NSF career grant. And also, a huge amount of trust to bring myself into the field with her for our very first shoot. So I had camping experience, but I had never had fieldwork experience. Working in the field, working in film production, there's a lot of preparation that go into both, but you also need to have a lot of flexibility and understanding of situations, the environment, being able to adjust and to work with a team. Because I think if you're on a film set, if you're in a field, you really need to rely on one another. And so because of that, I related really well with the scientists that we went into the field.
Ellen, is it more important to blend science with art or with communication, which are two topics that generally they are not taught when you study science?
Do I have to pick one? I mean,
what would be the priority if you had to teach a course? What would be the first topic? What is the one that you think is more important, and what is the reason why you think it is important? That would help you to decide which is the more important.
Well, I don't know that I could say the more important, but I would think maybe for scientists, the more approachable might be communication. I think that's, for many of us, closer to what we're used to. You know, we are trained in writing papers and giving talks. And so then now this next step would be writing such that non-scientists can understand it, speaking such that it's interesting and engaging to the non-scientific audience.
Who's teaching these important skills?
So there is a growing field of science communication. We have a fantastic faculty member here at Wyoming, Beth Ann Markle, and she comes from a fine arts background. So she's a creative writer and scientific illustrator. And she's been doing all sorts of amazing courses and outreach for our students and faculty. You know, I think about someone like Lexi would also be amazing at this, being able to, you know, come at it from someone who doesn't have as much background in science, but has this amazing background in storytelling. And then being able to say, okay, you've got this fabulous science, you're passionate about it. Now, here's how you turn it into a story.
Lexi, tell us more about the storytelling. Tell us in the audience, the geoscientists that they are listening, how can they improve their communication through storytelling? What are the basics?
I think coming up with an original plan for your story, so outlining it before you even film it, and then understanding how to build a story arc, I think is a good part of where are you beginning, what's going to be the meat of the story, and then how are you going to conclude it. Now with documentary film, you can absolutely have the best laid plans and the story will change based on what you actually are able to document. So I think for field scientists, you know, you can go into the field expecting what you'll find, but really the only conclusions you can make are based on the specimens that you find, what you can conduct your science on. So if you don't have the story you started out with documented on film, it will change and morph into something probably bigger and better, but to be flexible with understanding what you've actually captured.
Alan, what are the main things that your parents taught you?
Well, that's a good question. Number one is my parents taught me to love learning and to love reading. My dad was a math professor, so getting that quantitative side. And I remember, I think I started playing Yahtzee with my mom when I was like 3. And so at 3, I started, you know, counting the numbers on the die, and that soon got me to adding and so on. And then just that unconditional support and encouragement. So I was in kindergarten when I learned about dinosaurs and decided I wanted to be a paleontologist. And my parents, I think, heard over and over again this, well, why don't you have her do something more employable? You should steer her away from this. Why doesn't she become a doctor? She's smart. And they never put any pressure on me. Instead, they took me to natural history museums, to rock shops, support of what I wanted to do, whether or not it was what their first choice might have been.
Was it more do you remember more the things that your mother or your father taught you?
That's a hard question. And, you know, so first of all, you know, recognizing my privilege again, I, you know, come from a very stable and economically stable household. So my dad had a full-time job. My mom stayed home with us when we were kids. And so I certainly had a lot more face time with my mom, and she was more involved in everything.
What do you think about the struggle of your mother as a woman at that time in the previous generation? Because it's maybe likely that you grew up with this bias within your family.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And my sister and I have both really struggled with balancing careers and families, and feeling this guilt over, we still have an amazing mom who we were the center of her, I mean, for lack of a better word, her profession, her career. And now my sister and I both have full-time jobs, and we are not able to do for our kids everything that our mom has done for us. And so then you feel guilty over that.
But do you think
Yeah.
that this feeling of being guilty is part of the societal construction? It is imposed to women, in this case you, Alan and Lexi, by society.
Oh, I think absolutely that there are pressures to be, to be nurturing and motherly, and that stereotype that we have set up for women. And just, also flipping that on its head. So my brother-in-law chose to stay home with his kids for a while. And the prejudice that he faced for that, well, why aren't you working and bringing in money? And, there's all the moms groups, but he didn't have a dad's group that he could belong in. So there's, the stereotype does go both ways and hurts people on both sides. Going back to something Lexi said earlier, that for those of us who are minorities in our either in our communities, in our professions, there's this pressure to not just be average, but you have to be perfect. You have to be better than perfect, because you are setting the standard for your race, for your sex, for, whatever part of your identity makes you a minority. And if you are not perfect, you are letting down all women. You are letting down all people of color.
You say that this is wrong.
It shouldn't be that way, but it is. And there's some beautiful scholarship that's been done about this. I would recommend everybody to read Claude Steele's Whistling Vivaldi, which, really gets at that pressure to be perfect, or otherwise you're letting your group down, and then the negative effects that has on your psyche, on your health, on your just general well-being.
I used to play ultimate frisbee. If you dropped the disc, that was bad. And so if you were a woman playing on the field and you had one drop, you would be judged for that, and people would not throw to you, because there was this understanding that you would drop the disc if it came to you. Now, male players playing on the same team could drop the disc once, and they would still be considered as a valid player while on the field. But if they dropped the disc 3 times, they would have that same gut reaction. So men were allowed 3 drops before it was considered a problem, whereas women on the field, the stigma would start after 1 drop. And so I think that that's a really good physical example of, as a woman, you have a lot less freedom to screw up or to do something unprofessional, because that will follow you for the rest of the game or the rest of your career. Whereas men, it's overlooked until it's repeated enough. So women are not allowed that chance to falter, because it will follow them. And Leslia Halusko, Dr. Halusko, who is in our book, states she will be in the field for 3 months. And if on the last day of those 3 months, she is the first one tired and is having a hard time carrying her equipment, that will negate the rest of the time that she has spent being strong, being the first one back, the most energetic. If it's just that once, that will basically fit the stereotype of her being a weak female. who's problematic in the field. And so, you know, you really need to pay attention to that of, you know, why are you judging these people? And it doesn't matter if you have a perfect record, a clean slate. It takes one time for you to, you know, fall down a few rungs and to fit that stereotype.
Lexi, what are the main things that your parents taught you?
So unlike Alan, I came from a very, very creative family. So my parents were both in theater. I went to a performing arts charter high school that my mother founded, and then my father worked at. So I was, you know, Ellen was playing Yahtzee at an early age. I was on stage as a servant in summer Shakespeare plays. So, you know, I think that that's a really good example of, you know, the influences. Ellen and I are both very lucky to have parents who are involved in our lives and who have invited us to share in their interests. I think that that's a testament to the fact that this project even exists, is because I was able to come to them with this idea, you know, as raw as it was initially, and to be able to put it to voice, because I think as an artist, that's the hardest part, to be able to verbalize what you envision in your mind and to make it make sense and to have people believe in it. And so I've never been concerned about bringing these ideas to my parents, because I know that they would not fall on deaf ears, that I would be listened to and respected, and that I would get an honest response back from them.
It is beautiful and inspiring to see that you both recognize that you had privileges, even though you are fighting in a situation where you are struggling. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. What should we teach to our sons and daughters with regard to the topic that we are covering today?
So, I mean, the immediate thing that comes to mind for me is that with hard work and with passion, you can achieve what you want to. But I recognize that while while that might be true for a middle-class white person like me, that is not necessarily true for people who are struggling to make ends meet and to put food on the table. Thinking, I guess, more positively, just the importance. How about more positively?
Don't feel to be positive, which is another thing that is imposed by
Well,
society.
that is a good point. But I did think of something positive that I think is a good message out of our book, and that is find your community. Find those people who will be supportive of you and who have your back. And so, you know, Lexi is certainly one of those people for me. And I had her from before the project started. But then through the project, I had an opportunity to meet so many other paleontologists who have struggled with the same thing that I have, and also with different things. But having that community, having that validation of, yes, you are experiencing struggles. So I guess my take home would be build the community.
Lexi, do you have sons or daughters?
Yeah, I have a 3-year-old son.
So what will you teach him about this situation where women are struggling in general, in specific in geosciences? How are you gonna help him change the situation?
Well, I think first things first is to show him that I'm able to do what I am passionate about. To show him through the actions of my husband and myself, to share the workload in terms of raising him. I think, especially with young children, you really need to establish that dad can also be the one you can go to for comfort and for love, and for needs. I think establishing that early, you know, shows that men can also be caretakers, and be the support systems that are usually on the mother's end of things. The the challenges that I've been set up with in my generation is, in order to succeed, you need to be able to do everything and to do it well. And that means that you have to have a career that you love and you're passionate about, and that you're always moving forward and moving in an upward progression. That means that you need to have a partner. That means that you have to have a child. And that if any one of those three are missing, you have not fully achieved successful womanhood. And I think that that's something that I definitely struggled with, of figuring out, well, when can I be a mother? And if I am a mother, am I sacrificing my career if I spend time with him, or am I sacrificing time with him for my career? We're starting to acknowledge that that's impossible. It's an impossible thing to expect of women, and that it should not look easy, and it should not be how we succeed. You can do one of them, you can do none of them, and you can still be a successful woman in society. And so I think coming to understand that, luckily I'm stepping into a point where motherhood's given more credit than it has previously.
Thank you, Lexi and Alan, for sharing your personal experiences. I think that you, as editors of the book that we're talking about, the Bearded Lady Project, Challenging the Face of Science, is important. It's important to know who edited and who wrote parts of this book, something that you will never write. At some point in the very first dinner, you are writing this in the book, Lexi. At some point in the dinner between you, Alan, and Lexi, you were looking for a solution for the frustrations of women in geoscience. And Alan, I think, said, maybe if I could put a beard on, then I could actually do my job. And you, Lexi, you had an epiphany. Can you talk about what happened in your brain?
I think it was the perfect storm. It was the perfect combination of ultimate self-pity for myself, ultimate heartbreak for understanding for the first time that a dear friend of mine, someone whom I had held up to the highest standard of success because I had witnessed it personally, I had heard her stories, I saw her work, and to see that even that didn't do anything to combat stereotypes, that Ellen was still treated the same way I was treated, and I was very low on the food chain at that point in time. It was just, well, is there anything that we can do that, going back to Ellen saying, tell your kids that hard work, dedication, that's going to help you succeed in this world. That means nothing if your gender, if what you look like, if who you are, your identity will always hold you back because you don't fit that mold or that expectation of who's successful. Just exploded, and I couldn't get it out of my head because Ellen's response was totally offhand, nonchalant. We were kind of digging our hole of self-pity at the meal, and typical Ellen form, let's lighten the mood, let's enjoy our meal. And my response is, what if I just put a beard on? Wouldn't that be funny? And we laughed, but it was this kind of crying laughter where, it was sad, but true. There was really this nugget of truth to it that it just stuck with me. And I think, when you're on that precipice of sleep where, all these pieces are tied together and you make these connections that you might not have made were you actually thinking about it or focusing on it, that's when I just sent the email out, because it's those moments of inspiration where you think, if I don't write this down now, I'm going to go to sleep and I will forget about it. So I had to share it with Ellen, because if she wasn't on board, I would be reassured that this was a crazy idea, and then I would just let it float off into the ether. So it was really the perfect storm of comedy, tragedy, and a need to fix a seemingly unfixable problem.
Alan, how in the world you came up with this sentence? Maybe if I could put a beard on, then I could actually do my job.
I have no idea. And I mean, since the project started, people have sent me a lot of cartoons where, you know, you do see this sentiment. So clearly I am not the only person to have had it. And there's no aha, like, ooh, I was seeing this or that. Just thinking about some things that were going on that had resonated with me at that time. There were several like science documentaries that I had watched recently where, you know, it was 80% men and or maybe more than that. I mean, they'd have the token woman, but it was almost all men being interviewed. I'd heard some experiences from friends about being passed over for either for being profiled in public coverage or for career opportunities in favor of men. And then some of the popular print coverage celebrating the big burly bristled man out in the field digging up his dinosaur. And so I think maybe those verbal images were in the back, and I know, you know, this is not original to me. There have been lots of cartoons and jokes of, well, just put a beard on and then you get taken seriously.
And Alan, you're talking about these mental images that we have and you had. And the second part of the title of the book is challenging the face of science. When thinking about a scientist or scientists in general, many think about the image of Einstein, this old white man with mustache. And sometimes he's funny, he's crazy, but still he's an old man, white, with mustache. So would you like to compensate that image with one of a woman?
Oh, of course.
How do we do it?
Representation. And so for our colleagues who are working in public education, in the film industry, in museum education, in writing our science textbooks, you know, put in a broad swathe of people. It is, you know, absolutely irresponsible to only include men, to only include white people. And just thinking about, like, from an early age, what kids are getting exposed to. And if they open up their science book and they see people of all sexes and colors and wearing whatever clothes they want to, you know, so important.
And one of the very last questions is about you being editors of, in specific, the book. And you had to deal with different people, a lot of people. What was the most difficult moment in the coordination of this effort?
For me, it was the timeline. So there was always this idea of a book, and then the National Museum of Natural History in DC, we were going to have our exhibition there, and they said, you know, it would be great to have something in the gift shop to coordinate with the exhibition. And I had suggested the book, and they said, great, can you get it to us by this date? And I said, let me check. And I found an editor, and he said, yeah, I think that that's doable. So the turnaround time was about 7 months from start to finish. So we promised that date, and I think working towards that date to be able to get a designer, to be able to get the essays in place. And I treated the making of the book in a similar way that I would treat the documentary, where we had our initial idea, and then it wasn't until we got the essays in hand that we were able to see the kind of narrative that we could construct around the essays. So for each of the writers, all of the contributors, some of them I gave rough concepts to, some came up with their essays on their own. But just like the portraits, we wanted to give complete freedom to them to write what they wanted to write. to express themselves in the manner in which they felt comfortable with. And then we would work around them. And then what ultimately happened was we had the book ready to go, ready to meet our deadline, looking at printers and getting horrific printing fees back that were very terrifying because we were self-publishing initially. And randomly, our editor, Miranda Martin, came on, and she said, I love the book idea. If it's ready to go, let's do it. And they ended up publishing the book for us. So our timeline got pushed back, but everybody was happy to have Columbia University Press publish the book. The Smithsonian was very helpful and flexible working with us. So everything, you know, worked out great. It was just, you know, making the decision to do it and going full steam ahead. So my entire summer of 2019 was dedicated to the creation of this book.
What about you, Alan? What was for you the most difficult moment during the editing of this book?
For me, it was definitely finding the time to do it. And this is something that Lexi and I have struggled with the whole project, that it's nobody's full-time job. And, you know, so Lexi is a faculty member in journalism and communications. She's teaching classes. I'm a faculty member. My job description is, you know, 25% teaching, 55% research, 5% advising, and then 11% service. And so this falls into that 11% service bin, along with, you know, all of the like committee, university committee. I'm an editor at a journal. So it was trying to squeeze in hours outside of my normal workday to get this done. And also I wanted to highlight, Lexi told a little bit about how the book happened, and it's a really interesting story. And we've talked a few times today about, you know, having to build confidence and to believe in yourself when you're getting all these external messages and societal messages that you're not, you know, you're the square peg trying to go into the round hole. And so, you know, Lexi and I had this project that had been very successful. You know, we had the 2 films, we had the exhibition going to the Smithsonian, and yet it never occurred to us to be like, oh, we should approach publishers and see if they would want to take this on. It was just like no, we have to self-publish this because that's the only way it'll get done. And then it was purely chance landing with Columbia. So I had reviewed a book for Miranda Martin, for our managing editor. And then in having those communications with her, I was on her radar. And then she started following Lexi on Twitter. And Lexi tweeted a quote from one of those amazing essays in the book. And then Miranda contacted me and said, hey, I heard you have this book. Do you have a publisher for it? And then I was like, oh, Lexi, hey, look, there's a real publisher who just asked if we had a publisher.
We have now a couple of minutes if you want to say something more.
I think one closing statement that I have is that if we are actually going to change our assumptions of women, the involvement of women, we really need to help change mentors and advocates to understand what it means to advocate for women. And it really has to come from people other than women. It really has to come from the top. If you ultimately want to fill a position with a female candidate, then only create a pool made of women. I think that if we're actually going to rectify the problem, we need to get more people involved and not the people whom it directly affects. So, you know, the service requirements that are placed on Ellen and her colleagues are numerous. So like we said from the beginning, she can't just go and do her job because she has to be on the female representative on a search committee because we're trying to make everything equal and fair. But that does come at a cost to the research that's not being conducted during those job interviews. We need to think really long and hard about maybe honoring service requirements with more credibility than they actually are, that to understand the amount of service that it takes, to understand that to create a book like this that we love and we're very proud of, it means taking time out of our lives. You know, this isn't created by someone who is in a position of power, who is, you know, at the top end to help fix the representation. You know, it is oftentimes the minorities, the people who are having those issues, that are reading those articles, that are coming up with those numbers, that are saying, hey, look at this. And that's why I think going back to, well, should we have a feminist take? Absolutely. Having a feminist take means thinking about equality, thinking about someone who is not you, you know, thinking about a broader perspective and understanding that while your story is important, there is someone else's story who is equally as important standing next to you.
Thank you, Lexi, and thank you, Alan. We have been in conversation with Lexi Jamieson Marsh, filmmaker, and Ellen Currano, paleontologist. They are editors of the book coming out right now, titled The Bearded Lady Project, Challenging the Face of Science. This is your inquisitive geologist, Daniel Minisini, another program of the Mini Geology show that you can listen to minigeology.com. You can write me at minigeology@gmail.com to propose new topics to talk about and new people, colleagues, and friends to interview. You too, Alan and Lexi, if you want to send me some feedback or people to interview, we're completely open. This is a community program, and you have been so very welcome. Thank you so much for all of your volunteering and since 2014 for this project, an evergreen project, and so we'll look forward for your next brick in the wall.
Thank you, Daniel, for having us.
Thank you, Daniel.